It's almost time to head back out to the polls. Early voting for the party primary runoff starts in just about a week. Texans have a stacked ballot. Republican voters here in the 19th Congressional District, which covers most of the South Plains and Abilene, will choose between two candidates for the GOP nomination. You're asked to decide between Abraham Enriquez or Tom Sell. Tom Sell led the way on election night in March. He won 40% of the vote. It was then neck and neck between Abraham Enriquez and Matt Smith. Enriquez eked out an 18.75% of the vote, barely surpassing Smith's 18.5%. The winner will face Democrat Kyle Rabel in the general in November. Republican voters are also tasked with choosing a candidate for Senate. John Cornyn is running for re-election. He's represented Texas in the U.S. Senate since 2002. Cornyn won 42% of the vote in the primary. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is challenging him. Paxton won 40% of the primary vote. Paxton also made a campaign stop here in Lubbock this week. He's promising to champion President Trump's policies should he be elected. The president was expected to make an endorsement in the race, but he never did. The winner of the Republican primary will face Democrat James Tallarico in November. And while Ken Paxton gives up his seat as the state's attorney general in his bid for the Senate, both parties are facing a runoff between their candidates to replace him. Mays Middleton and Chip Roy are on the Republican ballot for AG. Middleton is the state House representative for Galveston. He won 39% of the vote in the primary. Roy is the U.S. House rep for Austin. He won 31% of the primary vote. And on the Democratic side, Joe Jaworski and Nathan Johnson are competing in the runoff for Attorney General. Johnson won 48% of the primary vote. Jaworski won 26%. Johnson is the Texas state senator for Dallas. Jaworski is the former mayor of Galveston. This is the second time he's run for Attorney General, unsuccessfully running in 2022. Republicans will also choose a candidate for Railroad Commissioner. The Railroad Commissioner is in charge of regulating the oil and gas industry, pipelines, mining, and more. The Railroad Commission oversees decision-making on issues crucial to energy production, the environment, and the state's economy. The Republican runoff is between Beau French and incumbent Jim Wright. Wright has served on the Texas Railroad Commission since 2001. French is a far-right candidate. He's making Islam, the Chinese government, and diversity the cornerstone of his campaign. He says those countries are running rampant in the Texas oil fields. And Democrats are also in a runoff for Lieutenant Governor. Vicki Goodwin is the state House representative for Austin. She won 48% of the vote in March's primary. She's facing Marcos Velez, a labor leader out of Houston. Velez won 31% of the vote in the primary. The winner will face incumbent Dan Patrick in November. Lieutenant Governor is the state's second highest executive. They preside over the state Senate. Early voting for the party primary runoff starts Monday, May 18th, and it runs through the 22nd. Now, it's a joint primary runoff here in Lubbock County, so that means you can go to any location to cast your early ballot, regardless of your party affiliation. You're able to vote at the same early voting locations as previous elections, which includes but is not limited to United Supermarkets around town, the Lubbock County Elections Office, and various city halls and community centers across the county. Election Day is Tuesday, May 26th.